7 nations. 1 desperate request. 0 said yes. I've spent 15 years analyzing coalition warfare, and I've never seen anything like what happened this morning. The President of the United States personally contacted America's closest allies, asking them to deploy warships to the Strait of Hormuz. Every single one refused on the record. Not quietly, not diplomatically, publicly. And what they said after that refusal tells you everything you need to know about where this war is heading and who is actually winning it. But there's something nobody is talking about, something buried in the pattern of these rejections that reveals a shift so fundamental it might reshape the entire global order. I'll show you exactly what that is in a moment, but first you need to understand what happened in the last 72 hours. March 16th, 2026. Trump posted on Truth Social calling on China, France, Japan, South Korea, the United Kingdom, and others to send their navies to escort commercial vessels through the Persian Gulf. No response. He then told the Financial Times that refusal would be very bad for the future of NATO. Still no response. Then the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations went on television and used language that changed everything. He said the United States welcomes, encourages, and even demands Allied participation. That is not a request. That is the vocabulary of a government that has run out of leverage. And it gets worse. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters, "These nations should contribute because they are benefiting greatly from the United States military taking out the threat of Iran." Translation, we started this war alone. We need you to treat it as a shared victory, and we need you to send ships into the firing line to prove it. Not one country agreed. Germany, Greece, Italy, Spain all went on record refusing without even being asked. I need you to pause here and absorb what that means. This is not diplomatic hedging. This is the entire Western alliance structure fracturing in real time under the weight of a war that was supposed to be over in 4 days. And the most dangerous part? The reason they all said no is the same reason, and it has nothing to do with politics. United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer held a press conference this morning and said, "We will not be drawn into the wider war," adding this was never envisioned to be a NATO mission. Trump's response was personal. He mocked Starmer for needing to consult his team before making a decision. That is a sitting American president publicly ridiculing the leader of America's closest ally for following basic democratic process. Germany's defense minister Boris Pistorius gave a 7-word answer that carries more weight than any policy paper. This is not our war. We have not started it. Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said Berlin expects Washington and Tel Aviv to inform us, to include us, and to tell us when their goals are achieved. That is not hedging. That is a government demanding to be treated as something other than a cleanup crew. France functionally refused. President Macron referenced a possible future mission when circumstances permit, which means he agreed to nothing during the only window that matters. Canada declined. Japan said it is reviewing options, but has no plans to send ships. Spain's defense minister delivered what might be the sharpest rejection of all, saying Spain will never accept any stopgap measures because the objective must be for the war to end and for it to end now. Then the European Union weighed in collectively. Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas gathered EU ministers in Brussels to discuss Europe's response. Afterward, she said there was no appetite to extend naval operations into Hormuz, adding, "Nobody wants to go actively into this war. 0 countries committed forces. That is the situation as of this afternoon. But here is what matters more than the refusal itself. Why did every single Allied government calculate that saying no to the United States was the safer option? The answer exposes a fracture so deep that it calls into question whether the post-1945 alliance architecture still functions at all. The first reason is consultation, or rather the total absence of it. In the days before February 28th, Trump reportedly told Gulf Arab allies the entire operation would be finished in 4 days. His chief economic advisor repeated a 4 to 6 week timeline this past weekend and insisted the administration was ahead of schedule. That timeline has already been contradicted by Israel's own military, which announced this week the war will last at least 3 more weeks with thousands of targets remaining. What is visible now is that key allies felt they had not been given enough clarity about U.S. war aims, timelines, or exit conditions. Estonian Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna put it plainly. What will be the plan? The Wall Street Journal reported this week that the administration planned to announce a convoy coalition as early as today, but the nations involved are still debating whether operations would begin before or after a ceasefire. If the coalition only activates after the fighting stops, it is not a wartime alliance. It is a cleanup agreement disguised as a show of force. The second reason runs deeper. For years, Trump targeted these same allies with tariffs, withdrawal threats, public insults, and NATO funding ultimatums. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, called the alliance obsolete, imposed trade penalties on European steel and aluminum, ridiculed Macron, Merkel, and Trudeau on the global stage. And now, the first time he genuinely needs military cooperation, he is not asking, he is threatening. He told reporters, "We will remember." That is not coalition building. That is coercion from a position of weakness, and every government on that call list recognizes it. The third reason is domestic. European voters are overwhelmingly hostile to this conflict. Energy prices were already painful from the post-Ukraine era. Brent crude has now surged past $100 a barrel. Natural gas is spiking because Qatar's liquefied natural gas, which European nations relied on after cutting Russian supply, transits the very strait that is now effectively sealed. Any European leader who sends warships into the Persian Gulf alongside the American Navy is ending their own political career. Madrid understood that. Berlin understood that. London understood that. The fourth reason might be the most damaging. The war is directly enriching Russia. Callas said it publicly. The Strait of Hormuz closure is funneling revenue into Moscow's war machine because every dollar oil climbs above 70 is another dollar funding Russia's campaign in Ukraine. NATO's primary strategic concern is Russia. The war Trump is waging against Iran is financing the adversary NATO actually exists to confront. He is asking European capitals to send destroyers to the Gulf while his own Treasury Department greenlights Russian oil sales. The contradiction is not subtle, it is policy. Now the geography. The Strait of Hormuz is only 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point, and Iran controls the mountainous northern shoreline. Tehran has spent decades preparing to threaten shipping there with mines, missiles, drones, and fast attack craft. Naval experts warn that reopening Hormuz safely while active hostilities continue would be extremely difficult even for major Western navies. There is also precedent no defense ministry has forgotten: the Red Sea. The Houthi disruption was a smaller-scale preview of exactly this scenario. 2 administrations launched strikes, admitted the strikes were not working, and continued them anyway. The Red Sea was never fully secured. Every allied military strategist drew one conclusion: if the full power of the American Navy could not reopen the Red Sea against the Houthis, no coalition is going to hold the Strait of Hormuz against the IRGC, which fields anti-ship ballistic missiles, submarines, and a coastal missile network hardened over 4 decades of preparation for exactly this confrontation. And now the part that matters most, the part most coverage has missed entirely. Iran is not just blocking the strait. Iran is using the strait as a sorting mechanism. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated it plainly. The Strait of Hormuz is open. It is only closed to American, Israeli, and allied vessels. Others are free to pass. Then Tehran proved it. A Pakistani-flagged tanker transited the strait on March 16th, carrying Abu Dhabi crude. 2 Indian carriers passed through safely. A Turkish vessel received clearance. China is in direct negotiations with Iran for guaranteed passage. France and the United Kingdom have reportedly opened back-channel talks with Tehran about securing their own vessels. Follow that logic to its conclusion. Every allied capital now faces a choice: join an American convoy mission and guarantee Iran classifies your ships as hostile targets, or negotiate directly with Tehran, stay out of the war, and keep your oil flowing. Washington is offering its partners the privilege of becoming combatants. Tehran is offering them the privilege of becoming customers. This is the strategic maneuver no one in the administration appears to have anticipated. Iran has converted the strait from a military choke point into a diplomatic lever that is actively peeling allies away from American leadership. Every nation that negotiates with Tehran for safe passage is implicitly recognizing Iranian authority over the waterway. Every successful transit arranged through Iranian channels is a quiet rejection of American power. The alliance is not just failing to assemble, it is being disassembled from the outside by the very adversary the war was supposed to eliminate. Before the war, 138 ships transited the strait daily. As of this week, no more than 5. Oil exports have dropped below 10% of pre-conflict levels. Brent crude is trading between $102 and $116 a barrel. The IEA announced on March 11th the largest emergency reserve release in its 52-year history, 400 million barrels across 32 nations. The United States alone is contributing 172 million barrels from a strategic petroleum reserve that only contains 415 million. That is 41% of America's entire emergency stockpile, and the release has not stabilized prices. Crude climbed 17% in the days following the announcement. Meanwhile, North Korea fired ballistic missiles into the sea 2 days ago. China has increased military activity around Taiwan. The PLA is reportedly monitoring this conflict on live screens, tracking missile trajectories and strike patterns. They are not intervening, they are studying. Dubai International Airport was struck by a drone today, forcing temporary suspension of operations. Qatar intercepted a second wave of Iranian missiles this morning. Kuwait's airport remains shuttered. Put the full picture together. The assumption: before February 28th, 4 days, total Iranian capitulation, the strait stays open, allies fall in line. The reality: Week 3, the Strait is under Iranian control, oil above $100, the largest reserve release in history failing to hold prices, and a unanimous public rejection from every allied capital Washington contacted. The assumption? Regime collapse. The reality? The son of the killed supreme leader assumed power within 72 hours and declared the Strait will remain sealed as leverage. The assumption? The coalition forms quickly, escorts begin, global trade resumes. The reality? Not one nation has committed a single warship, and several are now negotiating directly with Tehran for the access Washington promised its coalition would provide. The only question left is whether the next phase of this conflict is decided by Washington, by Tehran, or by the dozen allied governments that have just told the most powerful military on earth that it is on its own.